My name is Cassius, 34 years old, and until last Saturday, I was the guy my family called whenever they needed money. For 7 years, I've been my sister Megan's financial safety net, paying for everything from rent to her son Tyler's private school tuition. I thought I was being a good brother, a caring uncle. Then at Tyler's 16th birthday party, Megan handed me a slice of cake with 6 words that changed everything. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories about family, boundaries, and self-respect. I should probably start by explaining the complicated relationship I've had with my sister Megan over the years. Growing up, we were actually pretty close, despite being different in almost every way. Megan is 3 years younger than me, and while I was always the cautious, studious type who planned ahead, she was spontaneous, social, and lived entirely in the moment. As kids, this dynamic worked well. I'd make sure we didn't get into too much trouble, and she'd make sure I actually had some fun along the way. Our parents worked hard to give us a decent middle-class upbringing in the suburbs of Chicago. Dad was an accountant, Mom a nurse, and they emphasized education and responsibility above all else. I took those lessons to heart. Megan, not so much. After high school, our paths diverged dramatically. I went to State College for computer science, working part-time at the university IT help desk to offset some costs. I lived in a cramped apartment with 3 roommates, ate ramen more often than I care to remember, and spent most nights studying while my friends partied. It wasn't glamorous, but I had a plan. Megan, on the other hand, dropped out of community college after 1 semester to marry her high school boyfriend James when she was just 19. Mom and Dad were heartbroken, but in classic Megan fashion, she insisted she knew what she was doing. James was 21, working at his uncle's car dealership, and convinced he was going to make it big in sales. They rented a nice apartment they couldn't afford and started their life together. While they were setting up house, I was grinding away at school and internships. By 25, I had completed my degree, worked for 2 tech companies to build experience, and started my own software consulting business. The first 3 years were brutal, with 16-hour days and constant stress about landing the next client. But gradually, my reputation grew, contracts became more substantial, and I made some smart investments that paid off. By 30, I was doing well financially. Not wealthy by any means, but comfortable and secure. I still lived modestly, drove a practical car, and saved aggressively. Meanwhile, Megan and James were on a very different trajectory. Their financial struggles began almost immediately after marriage. James bounced between jobs, never staying anywhere long enough to advance. He'd always have big plans and ideas that never quite materialized. Megan worked retail, then as a receptionist, then as a server, but would quit whenever things got stressful. They moved apartments every year or so, always chasing something nicer despite their shaky finances. Then came the biggest change in all our lives. Tyler was born when Megan was 23. I still remember getting that call from the hospital and rushing over to meet my nephew. The moment I held that tiny bundle, something shifted in me. I instantly became Uncle Cash, as Megan jokingly called me, and I made a silent promise to always be there for this kid. That's when the financial support began, in small ways at first. Megan needed help with the hospital bills not covered by insurance. I transferred the money without hesitation. Then it was baby supplies when James was between jobs. Then help with their rent when they fell behind. Each time, there were tearful thank yous and promises to pay me back that never materialized. As Tyler grew, so did my financial involvement. When he started school, I covered supplies, then after-school activities. Then eventually, when he was 10, the tuition for the private school. Megan insisted he needed to attend because the local public school was just not good enough for how smart he is. I felt genuine satisfaction being able to help, especially when it directly benefited Tyler. He was a bright, kind kid who deserved every opportunity. I told myself I was investing in his future, and in many ways, I was. In the beginning, Megan and James expressed profound gratitude for my help. Megan would cook dinner for me as thanks. James would offer to detail my car or help with tasks around my apartment. But gradually, Over the years, that gratitude diminished. The thank yous became briefer, the acknowledgments rarer. My financial support slowly transformed from extraordinary generosity to expected obligation. Looking back, I can see the warning signs of entitlement developing. Megan's requests became demands disguised as emergencies. Tyler needs new soccer cleats by tomorrow, or he can't play in the tournament. Can you send $300 right away? James began making jealous comments about my success, as if it had fallen into my lap rather than being earned through years of sacrifice and hard work. Must be nice to have so much money you don't know what to do with it, he'd say when I bought a new laptop for work. The first time I covered Tyler's private school tuition in full was supposed to be a one-time thing. Megan called me in tears, saying they couldn't make the payment, and Tyler would have to leave mid-semester. I transferred $12,000 that day. When the next semester came around, there was another crisis, another tearful call, and another transfer. This pattern continued for 6 years. All this time, I lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment while they lived in a 4-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood they could not afford. I drove my 8-year-old sedan while James leased a new SUV every 2 years. I took one vacation every other year, while they somehow managed annual trips to Florida or the Caribbean. The disconnect between their financial reality and their lifestyle was stark, but enabled entirely by my constant influx of cash. Family gatherings became increasingly tense, as money topics created an undercurrent of resentment. Thanksgiving dinner would inevitably include James talking about some new business scheme he needed investors for, looking pointedly in my direction. Christmas became an exercise in inequality, with me buying thoughtful, expensive gifts for everyone while receiving token items in return. My dating life suffered too. I had a serious girlfriend for 2 years, Charlotte, who eventually left because she was tired of our plans constantly being derailed by Megan's financial emergencies. "You're in a relationship with your sister's problems," she told me during our breakup. "There's no room for me." She wasn't wrong. Just 3 weeks before Tyler's birthday party, I covered a $4,000 emergency car repair for James. His commuter vehicle needed a new transmission, and without it, he couldn't get to work. Once again, I transferred the money without hesitation, even though it meant postponing my plans to finally buy my own house. That's what family does, I told myself. We help each other out. Little did I know how that generosity was really viewed. Last Christmas was when I first began to realize just how unbalanced things had become. I spent weeks carefully selecting gifts for everyone. For my parents, a luxury weekend getaway they'd never splurge on themselves. For Tyler, the gaming console he'd been dreaming about, plus several games. For Megan, a designer handbag she'd been dropping hints about for months. For James, premium tickets to see his favorite football team. In return, I received a coffee mug from my parents that said "World's Best Son," a drawing from Tyler that I genuinely treasured, and a last-minute gift card for $25 to a restaurant chain from Megan and James. As I watched them excitedly open their expensive presents, I noticed something troubling. There was no surprise or exceptional gratitude, just the satisfied expressions of people receiving exactly what they felt entitled to. That was also when I began to recognize the pattern of Megan's late-night emergency calls. They always followed the same script. First, the call would come after 10, when she knew I'd be home from work. She'd start with small talk, asking about my day, my job, my non-existent social life. Then would come the heavy sigh, the "I hate to ask this," but followed by whatever financial crisis they were facing that week. The scenarios varied. Unexpected medical bills, car problems, house repairs, school expenses for Tyler, utility shut-off notices. But the conclusion was always the same. They needed money. Right away. And I was their only hope. And every single time, I'd open my banking app and transfer the funds while Megan cried grateful tears over the phone. James, meanwhile, had perfected the art of passive-aggressive comments about my career and earnings. "Some people just have all the luck," he'd say when I mentioned a new client. Or, "Must be nice to have money to throw around," when I bought a new phone after my old one died after 4 years of use. Each comment carried the implication that my success was somehow undeserved, or that I was showing off by occasionally buying things for myself. Through all of this, my mother played the role of peacekeeper. Whenever tensions rose, she'd pull me aside and whisper, Just be the bigger person, Cassius. You know how Megan and James struggle. She never held them accountable or acknowledged the imbalance. In her mind, family harmony was paramount, even if it came at the expense of fairness or respect. Looking back over just the past year, I calculated that I had covered 3 major expenses that would have broken most families. First was Megan's emergency gallbladder surgery, and the $8,000 in out-of-pocket costs their insurance didn't cover. Then came the $15,000 roof replacement on their house after storm damage, which their homeowner's insurance inexplicably denied. Finally, there were the 6 months of car payments I made when James was between opportunities after quitting his job because his boss didn't appreciate his potential. What bothered me more than the money itself was how Megan had begun to tell extended family about my contributions in ways that made me deeply uncomfortable. At our cousin's wedding, I overheard her telling our aunt, "We're so blessed that Cassius is so generous. We could never afford Tyler's school without him. He's like our personal guardian angel." The way she framed it made it sound like my financial support was some kind of divine birthright, rather than an extraordinary act of generosity that was straining my own finances. I tried once to help in a different way. When I heard about an opening at a friend's company that would have been perfect for James, with better pay and actual advancement opportunities, I stuck my neck out to arrange an interview. James went, but apparently spent the entire time explaining how the role was actually beneath his capabilities and how he had much bigger plans. My friend called afterward, apologizing but saying there was no way they could hire someone with such an attitude. When I gently tried to discuss this with James, he accused me of embarrassing him and trying to control his life. Through all of this, Tyler was growing increasingly aware of the financial dynamics at play. At family dinners, I'd catch his uncomfortable expression when money topics arose. He'd wince when his parents would make not-so-subtle hints about expenses coming up. At 14, he started declining some of the extra things I offered to pay for, like the summer coding camp he had previously been excited about. "It's okay, Uncle Cash. I know it's expensive," he said, breaking my heart a little with his premature financial anxiety. About 6 months ago, I made what I thought was a helpful suggestion at a family dinner. After listening to Megan and James complain about some new financial difficulty, I carefully offered to pay for them to see a financial counselor who had helped a friend of mine budget effectively. You would have thought I had suggested they sell Tyler into servitude. James turned red, stood up from the table, and ranted about how I thought I was so much better than everyone else. Megan cried and accused me of calling them failures. My parents just looked uncomfortable and changed the subject. The drive home that night was when I first seriously questioned whether my help was actually helping. But then I would think about Tyler, my smart, kind nephew who deserved every opportunity. Each time I considered pulling back financial support, I pictured him having to leave his school, give up his activities, watch his parents stress even more about money. My growing resentment always gave way to love for him. The most recent tuition payment was the largest yet. $12,000 for Tyler's upcoming fall semester of sophomore year. Private school costs had risen, and this payment strained even my comfortable finances. I had been saving for a down payment on a house, my first real home, after years in apartments. That dream would now be delayed at least another 6 months. But when Megan called, explaining that without the tuition payment Tyler might not be able to continue at his school, I made the transfer immediately. That was just 10 days before his birthday party. What I didn't tell any of them was that this payment meant I had to postpone meeting with the real estate agent about a house I had my eye on. A modest 3-bedroom with a yard in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing flashy, just a place of my own, after years of helping everyone else secure their homes. I canceled the appointment the same day I transferred the tuition money. It was around this time that a conversation with my best friend Marcus really began to shift my perspective. We were having beers at his place when he asked point blank, "Cash, when was the last time you did something just for yourself?" I couldn't remember. Then he said something that stuck with me. "You know they're adults, right? Your sister and her husband are grown people who should be able to support themselves and their kid. You're not responsible for their choices." I defended them at first, explaining their circumstances, the job market, the cost of living. Marcus just listened, then said, "Those sound like excuses, not reasons, and the longer you enable this, the less likely they are to ever stand on their own feet. The word enable hit me hard. Was that what I was doing? Enabling dependency rather than offering genuine help? I couldn't stop thinking about it in the days leading up to Tyler's 16th birthday party. But I pushed those thoughts aside. This was going to be a special day for my nephew, and I was determined to make it perfect. I had contributed significantly to making Tyler's 16th birthday special. Beyond the regular gifts, I had paid for the rental of an upscale venue, a local restaurant's private event space, with exposed brick walls and string lights that gave it a sophisticated yet welcoming atmosphere. The catering, a buffet of Tyler's favorite foods from gourmet burgers to build-your-own tacos, was also covered by my credit card. I even hired a local DJ who specialized in events for teenagers, making sure to provide him a list of Tyler's favorite songs. The special gift I bought for Tyler was sitting in my trunk, wrapped in blue paper with a silver bow. It was a high-quality laptop with the specs needed for the coding and graphic design Tyler had become interested in. The price tag of nearly $2,000 had made me wince slightly, but the thought of his face when he opened it made it worthwhile. This wasn't just any gift. It was a tool for his future, an investment in his growing skills. I arrived 2 hours early to help set up, carrying in decorations and arranging tables. Almost immediately, I noticed something odd. As other family members and early guests arrived, Megan was giving tours of the space, saying things like, "We wanted a special venue for his 16th, and we chose this because Tyler loves the industrial look." Not once did she mention my contribution, creating the impression that she and James had arranged and paid for everything. When Tyler arrived, his reaction made all the work worthwhile. He spotted me across the room and broke into a huge grin, jogging over for our special handshake that we'd been doing since he was 7. It was a complicated series of slaps, fist bumps, and finger snaps that ended with both of us pretending to straighten invisible ties. "Uncle Cash, this place is awesome," he exclaimed, looking around in awe. "Only the best for my favorite nephew on his 16th, I replied, ruffling his hair. "I'm your only nephew," he laughed, ducking away from my hand. "Details. Details," I joked back. It was our usual banter, comfortable and affectionate. As more guests arrived, I found myself engaged in conversations with extended family members who seemed to have a skewed perception of my role in Tyler's life. "It's so nice that you can help out Megan and James," my cousin, Sarah, said. "They talk about how generous you are all the time." "Tyler is a great kid," I responded, uncomfortable with the framing. "I'm happy to be part of his life." Another relative, my Uncle Philip, was more direct. "Must be nice having money to throw around. Wish I had a rich brother when my kids were growing up." His tone was joking, but there was an edge to it that made me wince. I noticed that Megan had taken complete control of the party planning, down to the smallest details, despite the fact that I was financing everything. When I had suggested a different caterer that I knew Tyler would like, Megan had dismissed the idea immediately. "I'm his mother. I know what he wants," she had said firmly. So I had backed off, allowing her to make all the decisions while I simply paid the bills. James had invited several of his friends to the party, men I barely knew who formed a loud group near the bar. I felt like an outsider as I watched James order round after round of premium liquor, knowing the open bar tab would eventually come to me. These weren't even people who were close to Tyler. They were James's buddies who saw the party as a free night out. At one point, I overheard a conversation between Megan and her friend Lisa that made my stomach tighten. "This is such an amazing party," Lisa was saying. "It must have cost a fortune." Megan laughed lightly. "Well, having a successful brother has its perks. Cassius loves playing the hero. He gets to swoop in with his wallet, look generous, and then go back to his simple little life while we deal with the actual day-to-day parenting." I moved away before they could see me, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Was that really how she saw my contributions? As some kind of ego trip rather than genuine care for my nephew? Throughout the evening, I tried to push aside these feelings and focus on making the day special for Tyler. I joined in games, chatted with his school friends, and made sure everything ran smoothly behind the scenes. But there was a heaviness in my chest that wouldn't go away. My mother pulled me aside at one point, her eyes concerned. "You seem quiet tonight, Cassius. Everything okay?" I hesitated, then replied, "Do you think I do too much for Megan and James?" She patted my arm. "You're a good brother. Just try to enjoy the day. Okay? It's Tyler's big moment. The conversation was typical of our interactions. No real acknowledgement of the imbalance, just a gentle push to maintain the peace. When the time came for gifts, everyone gathered around as Tyler began opening presents. He received clothes, gift cards, video games, and sports equipment from various friends and family members. With each gift, he was genuinely appreciative, taking the time to thank each person individually. That was one of the things I loved about him. Despite his parents' sense of entitlement, Tyler himself had remained humble and grateful. When he got to my laptop, his eyes widened as he unwrapped it. No way. This is the exact one I've been looking at online. This is incredible. Thank you so much, Uncle Cash. He jumped up to give me a hug, his excitement palpable. Before I could respond, Megan cut in with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Well, some of us have to be practical with our gifts. Not everyone can afford to show off like Uncle Cash. James nodded, adding, yeah, some of us have to worry about boring things like utility bills instead of buying the flashiest present in the room. I saw Tyler's smile fade slightly, discomfort replacing his joy. He looked at his parents, then back at me, clearly caught in an awkward position. It's not about showing off, I said quietly. It's about supporting Tyler's interests. The moment passed, but the damage was done. The pure joy of giving my nephew something special had been tainted by his parents' jealousy. As the gift opening concluded, it was time for cake. I offered to help in the kitchen, hoping some activity would clear my head, while arranging candles on the 3-tier cake that I had paid for from an upscale bakery. I overheard Megan and James in the adjacent storage room. Did you talk to Cassius about next month's mortgage yet? James was asking. Not yet, Megan replied. I'll catch him before he leaves. He just transferred all that money for tuition, so he might be tight this month. But he'll figure it out. He always does. We need to lock in that vacation rental deposit by next week, James continued. So make sure he knows it's urgent. I froze, candle in hand. Vacation rental? They were planning a vacation when they couldn't even pay their own mortgage? And they automatically assumed I would cover both expenses? Before I could process this, it was time for the cake ceremony. I pushed my feelings down yet again and carried the cake out as everyone began to sing happy birthday. Tyler stood beaming as 16 candles glowed before him, then took a deep breath and blew them all out to applause and cheers. That's when everything changed. Megan began cutting the cake, placing slices on small plates decorated with Sweet 16 in gold lettering. She served Tyler first, then their parents, then began working her way around the circle of closest family and friends. When she got to me, she held out a plate with a particularly large slice, a fake smile plastered on her face. Here you go, big brother, she said. Her voice, syrupy, sweet, but her eyes cold. Then, just loud enough for those nearby to hear, she added, buying stuff doesn't make you special. You're just the family wallet. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. But then James snickered beside her, raising his glass in my direction. Good old Uncle ATM machine, he added with a smirk. Always ready with a cash withdrawal. I stood there, the plate suspended between us, unable to move. It felt like all the air had been sucked from the room. In that moment, 7 years of generosity, sacrifice, and genuine care were reduced to a punchline. My mother, who was standing close enough to hear, gave me a look of weary resignation. Let it go, Cassius, she muttered under her breath. Not here. Not now. Her words hit me even harder than Megan's insult. Not because she was asking me to keep the peace yet again, but because her response made it clear this wasn't the first time such comments had been made. My mother wasn't surprised. This wasn't new. They had been talking about me this way all along, just not to my face. I glanced at Tyler, who was standing a few feet away. His face had gone pale, eyes wide with embarrassment and what looked like shame. He met my gaze for a brief second before looking down at his shoes. That look said everything. He knew. Of course he knew. He had probably been hearing comments like this for years. In that frozen moment, memories flooded through me. working late nights for weeks on a particularly demanding client project, then transferring most of the payment directly to cover their mortgage when they called in a panic about foreclosure. Canceling a rare vacation I had planned because Megan called crying about not being able to keep Tyler in his school if tuition wasn't paid immediately. The countless times I had put their needs before my own, without complaint or recognition. Most vividly, I remembered the conversation just last week about the tuition payment for the upcoming semester. Megan had called me on the verge of tears, saying the school was pressuring them for payment and they had nowhere else to turn. "You're the only one who can help us, Cash," she had said. "Tyler loves that school so much. He's doing so well there. I don't know what we'd do without you." I had transferred $12,000 that day. $12,000. I had been saving for a home of my own. And here they were, laughing about it, reducing me to nothing more than an ATM machine. Everyone around us had gone quiet, sensing the tension. The silence stretched uncomfortably as they waited for my reaction. Would I laugh it off? Make an excuse? And leave? Create a scene? In that endless moment, something shifted inside me. The hurt was there. Yes. The humiliation of being mocked in front of family and friends. But rising above those feelings was an unexpected clarity, like fog lifting to reveal a landscape I should have seen all along. This wasn't new. This was just the first time they had said it to my face. For years, this had been the dynamic. I wasn't valued as a brother or an uncle. I was valued as a resource to be tapped, a problem solver, a financial safety net. Nothing more. I felt a tightness in my chest that made it hard to breathe. My ears were ringing slightly. But alongside the hurt was something unexpected. Relief. Relief at finally seeing the truth without the filter of familial obligation or rationalization. A strange calm settled over me. For years, I had been a puppet controlled by guilt, obligation, and manipulation. In this moment, I could see the strings. And for the first time, I felt the power to cut them. With deliberate care, I placed the untouched cake slice on the nearest table. I didn't slam it down or throw it. There was no need for dramatic gestures. The decision forming in my mind required no theatrics, just resolve. Every eye in the room followed me as I walked with measured steps to the gift table where coats and purses were also being kept. From the inner pocket of my jacket, I retrieved a business-sized envelope. Inside was the receipt and confirmation of Tyler's tuition payment for the upcoming semester, which I had planned to give to Megan and James later as reassurance that everything was taken care of. Envelope in hand, I returned to where Megan and James stood. The smirks had faded from their faces, replaced by uncertainty as they watched my calm movements. "I've been happy to help support Tyler over the years," I said, my voice steady and clear in the silent room. "But I won't be disrespected or taken for granted anymore." I held up the envelope. "This is the confirmation of the $12,000 tuition payment I made last week for Tyler's fall semester." I paused, making sure they understood. "As soon as I leave here, I'm calling the school to cancel the payment. Good luck covering next semester. You've got about 3 weeks to figure it out." The silence that followed was absolute. Megan's face transformed in an instant, the mockery vanishing as panic took its place. Her skin went pale, then flushed red as the implications sank in. "You can't do that," she whispered, her voice suddenly small. "That's Tyler's education. I'm sure you and James will figure something out," I replied evenly. "After all, you're his parents. I'm just the family wallet, right?" James stepped forward, his previous smugness replaced by a desperate smile. "Come on, Cash." She was just joking around. "You know how Megan gets when she's had a couple drinks. We appreciate everything you do for us. For Tyler." "No," I said simply. "You don't. And that's the problem." I turned to find Tyler in the crowd. His face was a mixture of shock and something else. Something that looked almost like understanding. "Tyler, I love you. None of this is your fault. We'll talk soon," I promised. Then I walked toward the exit, moving steadily through the stunned party guests. No one tried to stop me. No one said a word. I could feel dozens of eyes on my back as I reached the door, opened it, and closed it quietly behind me. The moment the door clicked shut, I heard the eruption of voices inside. Shock, argument, panic. But I was already walking across the parking lot toward my car, the evening air cool against my flushed face. Alone in the parking lot, the emotional weight of the moment finally hit me. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my car keys. 7 years of financial support. 7 years of being there whenever they called. 7 years of putting their needs before my own. All reduced to family wallet. I had just reached my car when I heard the venue door slam open behind me, followed by rapid footsteps. James was running across the parking lot, his face contorted with a mixture of anger and fear. "Cassius! Wait!" he shouted, catching up to me as I unlocked my car door. "You can't just leave like this. You can't do this to us." I turned to face him. "To you? What about what you've done to me for years?" "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice rising. "We've always been grateful for your help. Grateful people don't mock their benefactors behind their backs. Or to their faces, apparently." James ran a hand through his hair, his strategy visibly shifting. "Look, what Megan said was out of line, okay? I admit that. We both had a few drinks, and it came out wrong. But you can't punish Tyler for our mistake." "I'm not punishing Tyler," I replied steadily. "I'm stopping the punishment you've been inflicting on me. You're his parents. Start acting like it." His face darkened. "So that's it? 7 years of being part of this family, and you're just cutting us off because of one comment?" "It wasn't one comment, James. It was the moment I finally saw clearly what's been happening all along." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "You know this makes you look bad, right? Walking out on your nephew's birthday? Threatening his education? Everyone in there thinks you're having some kind of breakdown." I laughed, genuinely amused by his attempt at manipulation. "I don't care what they think. For the first time in years, I'm thinking about what's best for me." His approach changed again, desperation creeping in. "Cash, please. We can't come up with $12,000 in 3 weeks. It's impossible. We'll lose Tyler's spot at the school. You should have thought about that before treating me like an ATM." "What do you want?" James asked, his voice breaking slightly. "An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. Megan's sorry. We're both sorry. Is that what you need to hear?" What I needed was respect and appreciation. For years. Not a panic apology. Now that the money's being cut off, he grabbed my arm as I turned to open my car door. "You can't do this. We're family." I removed his hand firmly. "Family doesn't treat family the way you and Megan have treated me. I'm done enabling your financial irresponsibility and entitlement." His face contorted, the mask of contrition dropping completely. "You think you're so much better than us, don't you? Mr. Successful with his own business. You've been lording it over us for years, making us beg for your help, getting off on the power." I shook my head. "That's the difference between us, James. I never saw it as power. I saw it as love. You're the ones who turned it into a transaction." "We'll tell everyone what you did," he threatened, voice rising again. "How you abandoned your nephew over a stupid joke. Tell them whatever you want. I'm done caring about your version of events." As I got into my car, James's anger gave way to panic again. He leaned down to the window, his voice pleading. "Cassius, please, at least think about Tyler. He doesn't deserve this." "You're right. He doesn't deserve parents who rely on his uncle to solve all their problems, instead of growing up and taking responsibility. Maybe this will finally force you to do that." With those words, I started the engine and backed out of the parking space. In my rearview mirror, I could see James standing alone in the parking lot, his shoulders slumped in defeat. For the first time in 7 years, I drove away from a family crisis without solving it for them, and it felt like freedom. The 30-minute drive home was a storm of emotions. Anger, hurt, relief, doubt, and vindication all competed for dominance. Had I overreacted? Had I been too harsh? Was I punishing Tyler for his parents' behavior? These questions chased each other through my mind as I navigated the familiar streets back to my apartment. By the time I pulled into my parking space, my phone had already begun to explode with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, and voicemails were piling up by the second. I ignored them all, needing time to process what had just happened before engaging with the inevitable fallout. Inside my apartment, I went straight to the kitchen and poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, something I rarely indulged in. I kicked off my shoes, loosened my tie, and sank into my couch, allowing the reality of the situation to fully sink in. I had just publicly cut off my sister's family after 7 years of financial support. I had done it at my nephew's birthday party. Was I the villain in this story? The thought had barely formed when my phone lit up again. Megan's name flashed on the screen for the dozenth time. I declined the call and put my phone on silent. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened her text messages. The first few were explosive with rage. How could you do this? You ruined Tyler's birthday. You're selfish and cruel. Then came the manipulation. Tyler is crying. He thinks you hate him. Is that what you want? Followed by the threats. If Tyler can't go back to school, everyone will know it's your fault. Is that the reputation you want? And finally, the fake apologies. I'm sorry if what I said hurt your feelings. You know I didn't mean it that way. Please, call me back so we can fix this. James had sent his own barrage of messages, following a similar pattern. Anger, guilt, threats, then desperate pleas. The common theme in all of them was the tuition payment. Not one message expressed genuine concern for how I felt or acknowledged the years of disrespect. Most surprising were the messages from my mother. Instead of the understanding I had hoped for, her texts were filled with disappointment. How could you embarrass your sister like that in front of everyone? Tyler was so upset. I raised you better than this. Cassius. Not a word about how Megan had embarrassed me. Not a single acknowledgement of the disrespect I'd endured. Just the same old expectation that I should absorb all hurts for the sake of family peace. I turned off my phone completely and went to bed, emotionally exhausted but strangely unburdened. For the first time in years, I wasn't responsible for solving someone else's financial crisis. The problem belonged to Megan and James, exactly where it should have been all along. The next morning, I took a rare day off work and kept my phone off until noon. When I finally powered it back on, there was one message that stood out among the dozens from Megan, James, and my parents. It was from Tyler, sent at 7:14 a.m. Uncle Cash, I'm sorry about what happened at my party. Mom and Dad shouldn't have said those things to you. I know how much you've done for us, for me. I'm not mad at you. I just wanted you to know that. His maturity and understanding brought tears to my eyes. In the midst of what must have been a chaotic aftermath at home, he had thought to reach out with kindness and clarity. I responded immediately. His maturity and is responded immediately. Lisa's, Tyler, thank you for your message. None of this is your fault. I love you, and that will never change. This is between your parents and me. Can we meet to talk this weekend? He replied with a simple yes. Thank you. I ended up taking the entire week off work, something I hadn't done in years, unless I was deathly ill. I needed time to process my feelings and decide on a path forward. I ignored the constant calls and messages from Megan and James, which grew increasingly desperate as the days passed, and they realized I was serious about canceling the tuition payment. My friend Marcus came over midweek with takeout and beer, providing the objective perspective I needed. You did the right thing, he assured me after I recounted the whole story. They've been taking advantage of you for years. This was going to happen eventually, but at Tyler's birthday party, I questioned, still feeling guilty about the timing. You didn't choose the timing. Megan did when she decided to insult you in front of everyone. Actions have consequences. He helped me see that my guilt was a programmed response from years of emotional manipulation. Megan and James had trained me to believe that their problems were my responsibility. Breaking that programming wouldn't happen overnight. By the end of the week, I had reached a decision. I would continue to support Tyler directly, but my days of being Megan and James's financial safety net were over. I called the school and arranged a meeting with their financial aid office, explaining the situation without vilifying my sister and brother-in-law. The school agreed to hold Tyler's spot for 2 weeks, while a new payment arrangement was worked out. After a full week of silence, I finally answered a call from Megan. Her voice was subdued, lacking the entitled edge I'd grown accustomed to. "We need to talk," she said simply. "Yes, we do," I agreed. "Can you come over?" "No," I replied firmly. "Not your house, not my apartment. Neutral ground." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. I arrived early, choosing a table in the corner that would afford us some privacy. When Megan arrived, I was struck by how tired she looked. Without her usual makeup and stylish clothes, she seemed smaller somehow. More like the sister I remembered from our youth. "James wanted to come," she said as she sat down. "But I thought it might be better if we talked alone first." I nodded but said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "The school called us," she said after an uncomfortable silence. "They said you contacted them about Tyler's tuition." "I did. They said you canceled the payment but asked them to hold his spot." Her voice held a question. "Also true." She fidgeted with her coffee cup. "Why would you do that? Either cancel it completely or don't. Why the middle ground?" "Because this isn't about punishing Tyler. It's about establishing boundaries with you and James." She looked up, her eyes showing the first hint of genuine remorse I'd seen in years. "We can't afford the tuition, Cassius. You know that. I know you've arranged your lives so that you can't afford it. There's a difference." Her face flushed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you and James make choices every day that keep you financially dependent on me. The house you can't afford. The cars you lease instead of buy. The vacations you take despite being broke. The jobs James quits because his bosses don't appreciate him." "That's not fair," she protested weakly. "Isn't it? Tell me something, Megan. If I died tomorrow, what would you do about Tyler's tuition?" The question clearly caught her off guard. That's a horrible thing to ask, but an important one. Because the answer is, you'd figure it out. You'd make hard choices, cut expenses, maybe take extra jobs. You'd do what parents do when there isn't a brother with an open checkbook. She was quiet for a long time. "I didn't mean what I said at the party," she finally offered. "Yes, you did. Maybe not in that exact way, at that exact moment. But the sentiment behind it, the view of me as nothing more than a financial resource, that's been true for a long time." Tears filled her eyes. "So you're just cutting us off completely? After all these years?" "I'm cutting off the unhealthy dynamic we've created. I'm still Tyler's uncle. I still care about his future. But I won't be treated like an ATM machine anymore." Our conversation lasted nearly 2 hours, covering years of resentment, entitlement, and enabling behavior. There were moments of genuine connection and moments of heated disagreement. By the end, we had reached an uneasy truce. I would help with Tyler's tuition directly through the school, but all other financial support would stop. Megan and James would need to take responsibility for their own lives and choices. The meeting I had arranged with Tyler took place that weekend. We met at a local park where we used to play catch when he was younger. Despite the circumstances, he seemed relieved to see me. "Mom and Dad have been fighting a lot," he confided, as we walked along a wooded trail. "About money, about you, about everything." "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this," I told him honestly. He shook his head. "I'm 16, Uncle Cash. I'm not blind. I've known for years that you pay for a lot of our stuff." "How did that make you feel?" I asked, curious about his perspective. He thought for a moment. "Grateful to you, but also kind of embarrassed sometimes. Like when Dad would buy something expensive right after asking you for money for emergencies." His awareness surprised me. "You noticed that? It was pretty obvious. I tried talking to them about it once, last year. They got really mad and told me I didn't understand adult things." I put my arm around his shoulders. "I want you to know that no matter what happens between me and your parents, I'm still here for you. Your education is important to me." "Mom said you canceled the tuition payment," he said hesitantly. "I did, initially. But I've been working with your school. The tuition will be paid, but differently than before. It'll go directly from me to the school." Relief washed over his face. "So I can go back next semester?" "Yes." That was never in question. "This isn't about punishing you for your parents' behavior." Our conversation shifted to his interests, his classes, his hopes for the future. I was reminded again of what an exceptional young man he was becoming, despite the complex family dynamics surrounding him. The most surprising aftermath conversation came a week after the birthday party. I was working at home when there was an unexpected knock at my door. When I opened it, James was standing there, alone. "Can I come in?" he asked. None of his usual bravado in evidence. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside to let him enter. He looked around my modest apartment with new eyes, perhaps really seeing for the first time how simply I lived despite my financial comfort. "I've never actually been here before, have I?" he noted. "All these years, and I've never visited your home." "No, you haven't," I confirmed, gesturing for him to sit. He perched awkwardly on the edge of my couch. "I came to apologize for what I said at the party, and for a lot of things, actually." I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "Megan told me about your conversation, about the arrangements for Tyler's school." He took a deep breath. "I want you to know I'm looking for a second job. Evening shifts at a warehouse. It's not glamorous, but it pays well." This was unexpected. "That's good to hear. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about us making choices that kept us dependent on you." He looked down at his hands. "You were right. I've had this idea in my head for years that I'm meant for something bigger, something better than regular work. But all it's done is keep us broke and keep you on the hook." For the first time, I saw James not as the entitled brother-in-law who resented my success, but as a man facing some difficult truths about himself. "It takes courage to admit that," I acknowledged. "Not as much courage as it took for you to finally stand up to us," he replied with a wry smile. "Look, I don't expect one conversation to fix years of whatever this has been, but I wanted you to know that I hear what you're saying. And I'm trying to change." We talked for nearly an hour, more honestly than we ever had before. There was still tension, still hurt on both sides. But it was a start. As we established new boundaries with each family member, I began to rediscover parts of myself that had been subsumed by my role as financial savior. I rescheduled the meeting with the real estate agent. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected. I even went on a date with a woman named Rachel who worked at the local bookstore, something I hadn't done in over a year. The process wasn't smooth or easy. There were setbacks, angry phone calls, and attempts to breach the boundaries I'd established. But for the first time in 7 years, I was standing firm in the face of emotional manipulation. And slowly, painfully, our family began to heal on new, healthier terms. 3 months after Tyler's birthday party, I finalized the arrangements with his school. I set up a direct payment system where the tuition went straight from my account to the school each semester, with one important condition. Tyler had to maintain at least a B average, and he had to check in with me monthly about his academic progress. This wasn't about controlling him, but about establishing a relationship based on communication and responsibility rather than just financial dependence. When I explained this to Tyler over lunch, he nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. It's kind of like a scholarship." "Exactly." I agreed. "I believe in you and your future, and I want to invest in it." But investments come with expectations. For any other financial support, I established clear conditions with Megan and James. If they needed help with a genuine emergency, I would consider it, but only after seeing evidence of their own efforts to solve the problem first. Additionally, any assistance would come with written acknowledgement of the amount and the circumstances, to prevent the gaslighting and memory revisions that had happened in the past. "This feels so formal," Megan complained when I first outlined these conditions. "It needs to be," I explained. "The old way wasn't working for any of us." Our first family gathering after the incident was Thanksgiving at our parents' house. The tension was palpable, as we all navigated our new dynamics. There were awkward pauses in conversation, careful avoidance of certain topics, and moments of unexpected honesty. "I got a promotion at work," Megan announced during dinner, a hint of genuine pride in her voice. She had returned to her job as an administrative assistant, something she had previously described as just temporary until something better comes along. "That's great," I said sincerely. "Congratulations. We're also looking at refinancing the house," James added, "trying to get our monthly payment down to something more manageable." These were small steps, but significant ones. For the first time, they were taking active measures to improve their financial situation rather than waiting for me to solve their problems. My mother took longer to adjust to the new family dynamic. She had spent decades in her peacekeeper role, and my refusal to just let things go challenged her deeply held beliefs about family harmony. "I just want everyone to get along," she said to me one evening when I stopped by to help her with a computer issue. "Getting along doesn't mean one person sacrifices everything while others take advantage," I explained gently. "Real harmony comes from mutual respect." Slowly, she began to see the positive changes in all of us. Megan was more independent, James more responsible, Tyler more confident, and I was happier and more fulfilled than I had been in years. My own personal growth during this period was profound. I began to recognize the patterns that had led me to become the family fixer. My need for approval, my difficulty saying no, my tendency to equate financial support with love. Working through these issues wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I started dating Rachel more seriously and found in her someone who appreciated me for who I was, not what I could provide. Unlike previous relationships, our plans weren't constantly derailed by my family's emergencies. When I told her about what had happened at Tyler's birthday party, she listened without judgment. "It takes courage to change a dynamic that isn't working, especially with family," she observed. "Most people just keep the peace and suffer silently." With her encouragement, I began seeing a therapist to work through the complex emotions surrounding my family relationships. Dr. Thomas helped me understand that establishing boundaries wasn't selfish, but necessary for healthy connections. "Generosity without boundaries isn't sustainable," he told me during one session. "It leads to resentment on your part and entitlement on theirs." This perspective helped me work through the lingering guilt I felt about the dramatic way things had changed. I came to understand that while my approach at the birthday party might have been imperfect, the underlying message was necessary and long overdue. My relationship with Tyler grew stronger through these changes. Without the complicated financial dynamics muddying our connection, we developed a more authentic bond. He began coming to my apartment every other weekend, where we would work on coding projects together or just hang out. He confided in me about school, friends, and his hopes for college in a way he never had before. 6 months after the birthday party incident, I closed on my first house. It wasn't the property I had originally been looking at, but something better. A 3-bedroom craftsman with a generous yard and a home office. At my housewarming party, Tyler was the first to arrive, eager to help set up. "This place is awesome, Uncle Cash," he said, exploring the rooms. "And you deserve it." Megan and James came later, bringing a houseplant as a gift. There was still some awkwardness between us, but also a growing respect. They had made significant changes in their lives. James was working 2 jobs, Megan had her promotion, and they had downsized their car to something more affordable. "We're actually starting to save a little each month," Megan told me quietly as we stood in my new kitchen. "It's not much, but it's a start. That's more important than you know," I replied, genuinely proud of their efforts. My parents arrived with food and decorations, my mother fussing over the arrangement of furniture while my father pulled me aside. "I owe you an apology," he said, surprising me. "I let your mother handle all the family dynamics over the years, and I didn't step in when I should have. I saw what was happening with you and Megan and James, but I took the easy way out by staying silent." His acknowledgement meant more than I could express. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." As I looked around at my family gathered in my new home, I realized how much had changed in half a year. The relationships weren't perfect. The old patterns still sometimes emerged. But we were all growing, all healing. The most profound change was within myself. I had learned that true generosity comes from a place of choice and abundance, not obligation and scarcity. I could still help my family when appropriate, but not at the expense of my own well-being. I had also learned that real love sometimes means allowing people to face the consequences of their choices. By constantly stepping in to save Megan and James from financial difficulties, I had been robbing them of the opportunity to develop resilience and responsibility. Tyler's academic success continued, and our monthly check-ins became something I looked forward to. He was researching colleges now, excited about computer science programs that could build on the coding skills we'd been developing together. "I want to be financially independent," he told me during one of our conversations. "I don't want to repeat my parents' mistakes." "You won't," I assured him. You're already on a different path. My new approach to financial decisions extended beyond my family. I became more intentional about my giving, supporting causes I believed in. Rather than just responding to whoever asked the loudest, I found joy in generosity again. Once it came from choice rather than coercion. As I reflect on everything that happened since that fateful moment at Tyler's birthday party, I'm grateful for the painful awakening it provided. Sometimes it takes a moment of clarity, even a moment of hurt, to break patterns that aren't serving anyone well. Family relationships are complex and imperfect. They require honesty, boundaries, and mutual respect to thrive. When one person constantly sacrifices while others take, no one really wins. True family support means helping each other grow, not enabling each other's worst tendencies. I still believe in generosity and helping those you love. But now I understand that the greatest gift you can give someone is sometimes the space to solve their own problems and develop their own strength. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members who were taking advantage of your generosity? Or have you been on the other side, realizing you've been depending too much on someone else's support? Share your experiences in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the healthiest relationships. Don't forget to like this video if you found my story helpful, subscribe for more real-life experiences, and share with someone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Thank you for listening. And remember, true generosity comes from freedom, not obligation.